Welcome back to this episode of the Shooting Bricks podcast. And wow, just wow, the postseason of injuries continues yet again. But we'll get into that and more. But as always, I'm Jerry Castillo, and I'm joined by.
It's been a crazy season so far. It's been honestly been kind of a hot mess in terms of injuries. But anyways, I'm Daniel Huynh and I'm joined by.
Yeah, can't even express it how much this postseason has been. Hasn't been living up to the hype as far as just everybody staying healthy, I guess. But it's your boy Relly Rail Jarrell Sells.
And gee, you mentioned it. Like this season, just the injuries have just been piling up, piling up, piling up. And, you know, last night we saw perhaps the one person we didn't want to see get injured in Giannis Antetokounmpo. And for all those that missed it, I think it was Clint Capella. He was going up for a lob attempt or an alley-oop attempt, and then he came down awkwardly on Giannis's left knee to the point where it got hyperextended backwards. And just looking at the replay, it was sickening, dude. It was one of those things where you just you watch it once and then that was it. That's enough. But the fact that TNT kind of showed it back and back to back to back to back was kind of weird. But yeah, no, he it looked really really bad, and he kind of it was in the third quarter where the Bucks were down throughout most of the game, and it looked like they were trying to get their footing. But then this happened, and they just lost all momentum, and this could potentially change the dynamic of the series because we don't necessarily know what the extent of the injury is. It could range from an ACL to an MCL to just even a bone bruise. And I don't know if you guys saw, but was there any updates on what the injury status was? It was just a really
Um,
bad
they're
hyperextension, right?
They are supposedly scanning it today, but as of right now, I have not heard of any public announcement. But it looks bad.
I think
Right.
I heard something about the scan coming back negative. Not too much information on that or the initial scan, but something came back negative for sure.
Right. And with that being said, like we because we don't know the severity of Giannis's knee injury, obviously he's going to be out for game 5. There's no doubt he's not. Well, he could unless through Herculean efforts he plays game 5, but more often than not, it's fair to say that he is not playing game 5. So, as it stands, the series is tied 2-all, with Milwaukee losing in a blowout, which makes sense because your best player is out, your best two other players aren't playing at all. So, just thoughts on this situation, just thoughts on the series as a whole, because Trey Young missed game 4, but Lou Williams stepped in and, poured in 21 points. So, thoughts on the series so far?
It's crazy to say this. I mean, it's crazy how opinions can change in within the matter of days. A couple days ago, I was literally thinking, "Oh, Milwaukee has just regained all momentum this series. Trey Young is going to be out for a little bit." But after what we saw the other night with Giannis potentially getting injured, that injury looked really bad. I will not be surprised if there is major time missed from this postseason on to early parts of next year. The Hawks have completely like retaking the reins of the series once again. It's now come down to the battle of attrition. And I think Trey Young's injury, while it may have seemed bad at the moment, it did not look like anything like this, like severity of Giannis's what Giannis is going through right now. I think Trey Young is going to get. I think it's very likely we're going to see him back in the series again. I'm suspecting there's a good chance he could be back for game 5. I think Atlanta without Giannis, the heart of this team is gone. Giannis, even though with his limits, he was the leader of this team. He was the guy leading their strategy these last couple games was to essentially use their size. Without him, there's not really any smack to that strategy anymore. So it. I mean, without Giannis, this Bucks team is not the same. So uh, I think the Hawks are going to win this in 6 or 7 now.
Yeah, and
It feels that way.
really quickly, just to update on Giannis. So, according to ESPN, Zach Lowe and Adrian Wojnarowski, Giannis did not suffer any structural damage to his left knee, and his ligaments are sound. So, Giannis is doubtful for Game 5. But go ahead, G.
Yeah, kind of agreeing here with Daniel. I'm not too sure if I'm Nate McMillan if I'm going to play Trae Young, just given how well the Atlanta Hawks fared without him against the fully healthy, at the time, Bucks. We have veteran players. We talk about how this team is so young, but we have Lou Williams. Lou Williams has been around the block a few times. He's 16 years in the league. We have Danilo Gallinari. We have Bogdanovic, although he is young in the sense of NBA competition. He's 28 years old. He's been playing professionally for a minute. So all that to say, players are stepping up. I looked at the game, and in the fourth quarter, he just emptied the bench. And I'm over here thinking, I see 5, 6, 7 different players come into the game, and I'm like, none of these players played the whole series. So the Hawks have all these young players and people I've never heard of on the bench. They've only been running a 6, 7-man rotation. I forgot they even had Cam Reddish, and then I think they still have DeAndre Hunter on the squad. Mm-hmm. So there's players there that have talent, and apparently just like with Tyronn Lue, some coaches instill this confidence in players, and I think Nate McMillan is one of those coaches. So with that being said, and I hate to just go against the Bucks, but it just doesn't seem like this is their time either, and it's just sad to see Giannis go down. But I'm gonna say the Hawks. I'm gonna say the Hawks in 6.
Yeah, I mean that's fair to say. I mean, you also forget that Chris Dunn is also on the squad too. Like he's missed the entire year, and if he needs to pull out a defensive specialist to maybe like we saw Khris Middleton go off for 20 points in the fourth quarter in Game 3. If he needs some sort of spark, yeah, Chris Dunn's like 6'4", Khris Middleton's 6'8". I mean, yeah, sure, but I mean it doesn't hurt to try, right? He has so many different weapons, Nate McMillan does, that I think it's going to be a very interesting situation moving forward, especially if the Hawks will probably take a 3-2 lead. Unless something, again, drastic happens with Giannis. Because in Game 4, the Hawks were shooting 50% from the field, while Milwaukee only shot 39% and shot 20% from 3.
Atrocious.
Yeah, I mean, you guys mentioned it was a war of attrition. Well, when I think of that, I think of like those low scoring affairs that have been happening in the Western Conference Finals, which we'll get to in a minute. But I just don't think that there's enough for the Bucks. I'm still holding out the Bucks win in 7. But I just don't think there's enough for the Bucks to feasibly take this unless Giannis is at least 70 or 80% healthy, which he won't be, especially considering what just happened. So
I just want to voice that even though Khris Middleton has had great games in this series, particularly around Game 3, where he went off for 38 something points, as I can recall. I just historically the trend is there that Khris Middleton has a lot of the time has not really shown up in when it counts most to help Giannis out. And with Giannis out, gotta remember Khris Middleton is not exactly Paul George. Even then, Paul George has had his playoff struggles himself.
He's like a discount Paul George.
Yes, and I mean, he's not really stepped up to show up before, and why do you expect him to show up now? So I just don't have any faith in Khris Middleton to get this Bucks team over the hump, even though they're much more experienced than this very young, raw, fresh Atlanta Hawks team.
I think. NG, before you hop in here, I think that I'm going to disagree because I feel like Khris Middleton, he's one of those players that's unheralded. He can potentially win you one game because he literally did it in Game 3, right? It was a close game and he outscored the Hawks by himself. He has that ability to turn it up when needed. Can he do it in Game 6? Maybe. Can he do it in Game 5? They need him to. If this series goes to Game 7, yeah, he can definitely do it, but will he? That remains to be seen. But go ahead, G.
I think the pressure doesn't fall on Khris Middleton's shoulders. I think it falls on the coach because he can put him in a situation. Coach B, Bodenholzer, the Bucks coach. It's not going to fall on Khris Middleton, but him putting his players in a position to be able to, step out and do something extraordinary. Unfortunately, Khris Middleton isn't a top tier player in the NBA, but he is more than capable of not being called a discount Paul George because
I
he has
mean,
played on an Olympics team. He has gotten All-Star appearances. So that's just my opinion. So I'm saying he's done more in this league to not be called a discount Paul George. That's just what I'm saying. But anyways, the pressure falls on Mike Budenholzer, and unfortunately, he has fell short time and time again. So that's what I think the downfall of the Bucks is going to be. I know Giannis is out, but sometimes I feel like a good coach can bring the best out of their players, like I mentioned earlier, Tyronn Lue, as well as Nate McMillan. But we haven't seen that out of Budenholzer. Who else on this Bucks team has stepped up or has stepped out of their role to become where we kind of noticed them? Even the star player that they got in this offseason, Drew Holiday, you know what? There's been games where he doesn't even touch the ball in the fourth quarter, or he's just out there like he hasn't been an all-star or second team all defensive player of the year. So I don't know. I'm putting pressure on Budenholzer. Let's see what he can do. Can he have Forbes have a great game? I know players, it's like a 50-50 thing, but I'm leaning more towards the coaching in this series.
yeah, and also the others, right? Because we have Pat Connaughton, who's played decently. You have PJ Tucker, who can hit corner threes at a clip, not decently, but you have Brook Lopez, and I don't understand why Brook Lopez, all 7 foot of him, is not anywhere close to the basket. That's just, and again, that's my opinion, but the fact that he's 7 foot taking on what Capella, or sometimes they have a mismatch and they have another smaller defender on him instead of Capella, the fact that he's not punishing that defender that down on the block, it's kind of criminal if you ask me. Like same thing that happened to DeAndre Ayton in the Western Conference Finals when they had Nick Batum or Terrence Mann on him. The fact that they didn't run plays for DeAndre Ayton in the post with a 6'4" to 6'8" guy, 6'7" at most, defending you, it's absolutely criminal. And the fact that, you know, because Ivica Zubac missed a game with, what was it, like an MCL sprain or like a knee sprain or something like that,
Mm.
whatever it was, the Los Angeles Clippers, and if you haven't noticed now, we're just switching to the Western Conference Finals. We're switching to the WCF because it was a really interesting game. They put an uber small lineup similar to the Warriors' death lineup, except a very, very much discounted version of the death lineup. And they took what was it, game five?
Yeah.
Surprising. Game five. The Clippers took it, and Paul George, he was just incredible. He played like an MVP. He played like, you know, the Thunder Paul George, maybe even the the Indiana Paul George, because he dropped 41 points. He was 15 of 20 from the field and scored 20 points in the third quarter. But it wasn't just him, because Reggie Jackson and Marcus Morris Sr. stepped up with 22 points and 23 points respectively. I saw this bizarre stat that if Marcus Morris scores 20 points or scores more than 10 points or something like that, or if he scores more than, or if he hits more than 50% of his field goal percentage, like the Clippers are 8-0 or something crazy like that. They're undefeated basically. Something crazy like that. I don't necessarily know all the details because I just saw it in passing, but Paul George, Pandemic Pete, I think he's earned the right to be not called Pandemic Pete, at least for the duration of this series, because you we talk about injuries. Kawhi Leonard hasn't played. He hasn't played at all. And the fact that it's a 3-2 series with the Clippers blowing out Phoenix in game 5, this is outstanding. Shout out to Tyronn Lue, you mentioned it before, for making the necessary adjustments, because Terrence Mann was in there in game 5. He was in there for the first few minutes. He saw that it wasn't working, so he pulled out Nick Batum. And I saw on StatMuse on Twitter, I have to double check, but I think the offensive rating was like 140 something, and the defensive rating was 88 for a discrepancy of like 60 something points. That's how much better they were with Batum as the 5 instead of Terrence Mann. And so, yeah, I mean, Devin Booker is going to get his, Chris Paul is going to get his, but if Paul George, but if the big three of Paul George, Reggie Jackson, and Marcus Morris Sr. are doing this to you, I think you're in trouble. I still hold out hope that the Suns will win this series at some point. I'm just not confident in how many games.
Tonight.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. Go ahead, Daniel.
Again, it's crazy how much a week kind of changes the narrative of anything. Look, here's the thing. I still lean the series going towards Phoenix winning the series eventually, like you said, Jarrod. But I think this series could go to 7 games. I've been on the record here many times ripping on Paul George, calling him Pandemic P. I mean, he's missed 2 critical free throws twice in this series so far, as I can recall to memory. But
Imagine, really quickly, imagine if he did. This would be a wholly different series.
yep. But I have to give some respect to Paul George here and this Clipper squad. Look, we've been ruling them out for like a month now, and we got to give it to them. They don't have a they have a no dice spirit. This team has persevered throughout the many course of many difficult games and a Kawhi Leonard injury, who probably, in my opinion, may not even return this postseason. I don't think this Clipper team is honestly good enough to beat this Phoenix Suns team in a matter of 2 games. But I think this team is they are not to be underestimated. I think we have underestimated them all postseason long. I think that needs to stop. This Clipper team is quite literally dangerous. This is the Clipper team we should have seen last year. I still think this Phoenix team is going to pull out the end, but I think this Clipper team is going to make it insanely difficult for Phoenix to make the NBA Finals.
That's fair.
I don't think we shake the name Pandemic P from Paul George, because every time we say that, I just continuously think about that shot from the side and it just hits the backboard. And I'm like, bruh, like, no. So it's always going to be a part of him. He just has to embrace it. You know what I'm saying? At this point, you know who you are as a player. I know that it's a mental game, but you know what I'm saying? I've said it last episode. Kobe said it many times and numerous amounts of times. Embrace the hate. And if they're going to hate you, go out and show what you can do on the court. And that's what he's doing here. I think the Clippers I don't think they do. They have some players on this squad that on paper, it looks nice. They have freaking DeMarcus Cousins, who arguably was the best big in the league for a couple of years. They have playoff Rondo. We haven't even seen that yet. They have a sniper in Luke Kennard on the bench. They have players from top to bottom. So even though Serge Ibaka is injured, and that's something that we just don't talk about, like he wasn't hitting from downtown, giving them a consistent 10 points and 6 rebounds, whatever he was averaging. But they have players to step up. Reggie Jackson is playing out of this world. Go ahead, Jarrod.
So, breaking, Ivica Zubac is out for Game 6 with a sprained MCL.
Oh,
they don't
that's
need
major.
Him. It's not major. They don't need him. They play better. Look what just happened last game. They play better. I know he gets his stats, he gets his double-doubles and whatnot, but they play better when they play small ball, because the Suns can't take advantage of it. Jarrod just mentioned it. DeAndre Ayton doesn't know how to post up somebody that's below 7 feet. So the Clippers have a little bit more fluid to their game, to their offensive game, and they're able to switch on defense. So I think they don't need Zubac. That's why they had Serge Ibaka starting at the 5 in the beginning of the season. What's been happening is vital moments in the games, like towards the third, fourth quarter, where Reggie Jackson happens to just transform into Michael Jordan or something, and he does stuff. Because Paul George carries the load throughout the game. Marcus Morris Sr. hits a 3 or 2, but it isn't. It's like a quiet 20. But it's Reggie Jackson. That's who the X factor is, because he comes out of nowhere when the Suns are battling back and forth. Patrick Beverley too. I feel like he's the X factor, because light skins, they just can't handle it. They can't handle it. Devin Booker is getting Patrick Beverley is all up in this man's head. Like, come on, man, you got to have that Mamba mentality and go off after Patrick Beverley. He's only 6'1", bro. You need to go get your buckets. But anyways, X factor for sure is Reggie Jackson. When he goes off, it's just like takes over. So every game that the Clippers won, I know Paul George is the star, but Reggie Jackson is that biggest X factor. I still say the Suns win. I have confidence that they can get the W today. Today, peek behind the curtain, Wednesday night. So let's get it in Game 6. Stop playing with your food. Let's get to the finals and rest up.
Absolutely. And, we're talking about Paul George for the most part. And just 2 questions here while we're talking about him kind of popped up. So this might seem like a blasphemous statement with a squad with Kawhi Leonard on it, but with this series kind of going the way that it is it fair to say that Paul George should be the number 1 option moving forward?
No, I don't think so. Paul George should be taken more into consideration in more of a leadership role, given Kawhi Leonard's inability to lead sometimes. But no, Kawhi Leonard is by far the best offensive option on this team, and possibly the best defensive player on this team. I just think Paul George has kind of proven himself that he can. I think he should be, at least Ty Lue should be more open to him being in a more leadership position in that locker room, being more of that voice. Because Kawhi Leonard at time has shown time and time again that he just can't lead. As we saw in that, during the game, the camera literally panned him, and his emotions was emotionless. So should should Paul George be considered for the number one option on this team? No, he's just not. He's simply just not the best talented player on this squad right now. That's Kawhi Leonard. But in terms of more a bigger voice in the locker room, yes.
Fair enough. And I think that's how it is because Kawhi Leonard can get his buckets, but I think that Paul George, if given the opportunity, would be a perfect 1A or 1B. That's just my opinion. But go ahead, G, real quick, if you have anything to add, if Paul George should be a number one option.
Yeah, I feel like Paul George can be a number one option for sure, especially on this Clippers team. We gotta stop putting dirt on Paul George because he is in his bag, and I'm just looking at the similarities as far as career averages. We have Paul George with a career average of 20 points per game, and then Kawhi Leonard with 19.2. So it's pretty similar here. I feel like both players are similar. It's just Kawhi Leonard has the Finals MVPs. Kawhi Leonard has the championships. But they're similar players. They're both wings that can play the 2, 3, and the 4. They are both terrific perimeter defenders, and they can both score on all three levels. So if we say Kawhi Leonard is the better defensive player than Paul George, because if we're looking at the defensive player of the year he won, let him focus on that. You say Kawhi Leonard takes a step back with being vocal. I think Paul George, if you have him focused solely on offense and you have Kawhi Leonard just continues to do what he's going to do, which is still give you 24 points a game and still be a defensive anchor, I don't see a problem with that because now we're having one player focus on one thing. You see when Anthony Davis comes to Lakers, just think of it like that. Anthony Davis was the number one option on the Pelicans, averaging 28 points a game. He comes to Lakers. He's still the number one option, but does it look a little bit more efficient as far as how he's getting his points, aside from him wanting to be KD and shooting fucking threes? But do you see what I'm saying? Maybe this is what needs to happen for the Clippers because now we're seeing Paul George blossom, and that shouldn't be happening for a 30-year-old. He probably should be in this position where he's able to showcase his full bag because Kawhi Leonard's going to do what he's going to do. It's just not going to be as flashy. But Paul George needs to thrive off of that Showtime type of stuff, crossing people over, having Chris Paul looking like he's about to sit on the sofa at the cribbo. But yeah, so I would say Paul George is the number one option on this team is okay because Kawhi Leonard is going to be still going to do what he does.
He's going to get his, basically. Like, it doesn't matter if, like, you run plays for Kawhi or PG. Both of them are going to get theirs. And I think, for me personally, I think PG would be, and this entire Clippers team, if they keep the same core next year, would be a lot more successful if they focused on PG because he's a smoother player on offense. So that's a thing. But also, quick question here. So I don't know if you guys saw the comments that were made last night where I forgot who said it, but someone said that Paul George gets a lot of criticism. And G, you talk about the mental aspect of the game. I think that Paul George doesn't get a lot of criticism. The fact is that he gets the same amount of criticism as every superstar, considered, from the 90s, the 80s, and whatever else. But social media is that much of a thing now, and it's more magnified. It's the same kind, but it's just magnified more, if that makes sense. So I just want to posit the question out to you guys. Do you think he gets criticized too often? Because we've been calling him Pandemic P for the longest time, but is that a fair thing to say?
I have mixed feelings on that notion in a way. I mean, look, at the end of the day, Paul, like every superstar in the history of the league has gotten criticized, and in a way, superstars on a certain level they just need to deal with it. It just comes with being a superstar. It just comes with being that good of a player. The difference here between criticism and what Paul George is going through, the thing is, we as fans and pundits alike, we have openly mocked him. Okay, we're kind of making fun of him. It kind of in the last year, ever since that whole Nuggets series has happened, we kind of pushed him into a spotlight similar to JaVale McGee for many years on Shaqtin' the Fool. It's becoming to the point where like we're completely we've kind of made Paul George into a much bigger joke than he really should be, because Paul George is one of the better players in the league. So in a way, I can see where Paul George is coming from. When you're being mocked and getting made fun of constantly, it gets to your head. It got to JaVale McGee's head after so many years. So, and Paul George has gotten the same type of thing in a way. It's much worse and in a much shorter time. So I kind of feel sympathy for Paul George here. But when you're a superstar and when you have fucked up in the past, like, it's not surprising that you're gonna get this type of treatment from fans and pundits alike. It's just the cruel nature of the new, like, the 24-hour news cycle. It's just the nature of it.
Go ahead, G.
I just think it's funny because, one, nobody called him Pandemic P until he self-proclaimed himself as Playoff P. Y'all about to see this, and we see the interviews scrolling down Twitter sometimes where when Russell Westbrook and Carmelo Anthony were all on the Thunder, and one reporter was like, "Yeah, like you guys seen this of I'm probably not recalling the interview as best as possible, but basically the gist of it was the reporter was asking Russell Westbrook and Carmelo that have they heard of this name of Playoff P, and they start laughing, and that's what we're doing, dude. We saw Nick Young on the Lakers shoot the three, turn around, dance, and it rims out. You know what I'm saying? LeBron James, we talk about his hairline. I talk about KD and his freaking hair. They don't brush their hair. Come on now. There's a certain culture, because I was about to go ethnic, but it's a culture around basketball, and everybody talks about each other, bro. It's trash talk, and now it's just extending outside of it. You're one of the best players in the world. You're going to get talked about. We still talk about Kobe today. RIP. He didn't pass, you know what I'm saying? But still had 5,000 assists for his career. You know what I'm saying? So Paul George, bro, I know it's a mental thing. Like, I kid you not. I understand. I'm not on the NBA level, but I understand how draining that could be. But bro, you got to shake it off, bro. Wipe your tears away, because everybody and their mama get talked about in the NBA, bro. I just talked about Devin Booker being light-skinned. Ain't nothing wrong with that, bro. He's a millionaire. You're a millionaire. Go get your buckets. Prove them wrong. It is what it is, my guy. Everybody get talked about. KD, bro. We still call him a snake, bro. Freaking things happen outside of the NBA. I forget which French soccer player, football player messed up in a game, and they're over here doing the little KD meme because he's gonna switch teams or stuff. I don't know, bro. It happens. It's social media. It's magnified, but you just gotta laugh at it, bro, because everybody that's making fun of you, Paul George, and I hope you're listening to this, ain't on your level, dog. You know what I'm saying? You living your dream, playing in the NBA. You got a bad wife, children, money. You know what I'm saying? You're living your dream, bro. Keep balling. Keep your head up, Paul Pandemic P. But yeah, I'm sorry, but y'all gonna lose tonight.
Wow. I mean, we're talking about last thing here before we move on to the quick hitters. We're talking about like these nicknames, right? Pandemic P, right? What about Lemon Pepper Lou? Because I'm thinking if Lou Will was on the Clippers right now, this would be a much shorter series for the Clippers. But I'm just curious because Rondo and Lou Will, they're both in the conference finals. So if you're either squad, who would you rather have? Would you rather have, if you're the Hawks, would you rather have Rondo or Lou Williams? And if you're the Clippers, would you rather have Lou Williams or Rondo? Really, really quickly before we move on.
I think in both of those cases, I mean, you said Lou Williams or Rondo, right?
Yeah, because they got traded for each other.
I have to side with Rondo here because he like,
So
regardless.
if you're the Clippers, you would take Rondo?
No,
Need time to
I
think.
don't. I'm just not sure. For Atlanta Hawks team, I'll take Ronald because he's a much more experienced guy. You need those guys in the locker room. But for a Clipper team, I can see your point with Lou Will because Rondo's he's not the player he used to be, and Lou Will at times can still produce. So yeah, that's how I would go with it.
And Rondo's not even playing. But go ahead, G.
Yeah.
For the Hawks, I'm sticking with Lou Will, Lemon Pepper Lou, because they need that offense. We see times where it's stagnant when Trae Young isn't on on the court or when they happen to have somebody like Bogdanovich injured. So perfect situation, especially with Trae Young injured now. Lou Williams stepped up. With the Clippers, I still would side with Rondo because Lou Williams is a liability on the defensive end. So I think it worked out. It just Rondo doesn't fit with this Clippers team. That's his fault. He should have stayed with the Lakers.
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, he got a bag, I guess, but we're talking about bags and just quick hitters here before we wrap things up. Chauncey Billups was named the Portland Trailblazers' next head coach, and it's a deal worth reportedly 5 years and some amount of millions of dollars, as is the case. And I don't know what you guys think about this hiring because I'm honestly on the fence about it. Um, it's been really, really strange. Shout out to Daniel for putting all these notes down. But not apparently, allegedly in 1997, Chauncey Billups was part of basically a sexual assault, and he and a few other Boston Celtics players at the time raped a woman. Billups was not charged, and it was settled financially out of court. When Chauncey was asked about it, and by extension, GM Neil Oshie, when they were asked about it during Chauncey's press conference, Neil Oshie said that an investigation was initiated and found that nothing illegal had happened. And it's kind of strange because Damian Lillard was pushing for Chauncey and Jason Kidd, who also has a history of domestic violence abuse. Um, he was pushing for either of those coaches to be hired, and it was just kind of a strange situation. And when Lillard was asked about it, he didn't know that they had this past. But yeah, it's just a strange situation. The backlash from this hiring could potentially push Lillard out, but just quick thoughts on this. This is a really, really touchy subject, and it's one that we need all the information on. But just really quick thoughts on this.
There's two parts to this of my own opinion. From a basketball perspective, I think, this is the one of the more ideal candidates you could have gotten. Like, if you want to build a championship team, then why not get one of those guys that was responsible for, one of the, more underdog championship runs in NBA history, Chauncey Billups, who's been famous as being a great locker room guy. Like, on paper, that makes complete total sense. Like, that's your ideal head coach. But from a PR perspective, I would have had so much trouble with completing this hiring decision. This is an incredibly seriously uncomfortable, touchy subject. I mean, a lot can go so wrong. So if I was the Blazers and if I was that president of basketball operations, I know they said they conducted the investigation, they found nothing illegal or nothing insanely wrong happened. They better be right, because if they're wrong, it's gonna bite them really hard. It's bad PR is never good business. So to the Blazers, I hope you made the right decision, because if you didn't, I mean, you're out of luck. So good luck. Good luck.
Not laughing at the situation. It's just really wild how you can dig up stuff from the past. I'm not saying it to brush over the severity of what is going on. I'm not going to touch up on it too much because Daniel did it. Good luck, right? I'm more like puzzled that they gave him a 4-year deal with the team option for the 5th year. So I'm more puzzled that Chauncey Billups has been an analyst for a while. He's been an assistant coach with the Clippers this is his first season, correct? Or am I? Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah. It's like, where's your resume? I know, look, I know you guys played in the NBA, yes, but playing and coaching, two different things. You can be a locker room guy, doesn't mean you need to be a head coach of a team. So if I'm Damian Lillard, I'm upset because I'm like, this feels like Jason Kidd with the Bucks or with the Knicks. You know what I'm saying? Like Steve Nash with the Nets. Like, bro, where's your Steve Nash a little bit? He worked with the organization with the Warriors for a minute, but where's your resume? Because if this was a regular job, you know what I'm saying, and you didn't play in the NBA, it'd be a different story. Like, we see a lot of players go and coach back, high school or college, you know what I'm saying, to get to build up that resume. So that's where I'm a little puzzled at. But I mean, they're all for it. I hope it works out. Never going to pray for the downfall of an NBA player being able to coach a team, and I'm not going to pray on the downfall of a black coach in the NBA as well. But I'm still puzzled as far as all the nitty gritty and details, especially when we have Becky Hammon and she's been doing her damn thing. But at this point, I'm like, nobody's going to appreciate her other than the Spurs. So once Greg Popovich retires, you know what? She should be filling in that spot since everybody else wants to act like buttholes, like she's not a good coach, or at least has a resume. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And it's really interesting about Becky Hammon, too, because when I think The Athletic published a piece a few days ago regarding Becky Hammon and making it to the final stages, the farthest any woman has ever gotten with regards to a head coaching gig. She got to the final stages of the process, and they ultimately chose Chauncey Billups over her. And once the kind of like the stuff with Chauncey Billups started popping up, I think it was Blazers PR or something, somewhere along the Blazers. Someone with the Blazers said that when the Blazers asked the Spurs information on, Becky Hammon, they were apparently, quote, told that she doesn't have the fine details of being a head coach fully down. Again, this is coming from the Blazers themselves. So whether that is kind of like PR speak for saying we chose Chauncey because we felt that he was better in a way to kind of like simmer down the fire that they started. I don't know. It's weird. It's a weird situation, but you guys speak of Jason Kidd. He got hired by the Dallas Mavericks as their head coach, and former Nike executive Nico Harrison has just been hired to be the, to be a GM for, was it the GM for the Mavericks?
General manager, and I think basketball operations as well.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting. And just a few more things before we wrap things up. The WNBA has reached a 99% vaccination rate, meaning 99% of the league is fully vaccinated. That's incredible. Shout out to the WNBA for doing things right once again and for showing us how it should be done. And lastly, the NCAA has announced that athletes will be able to benefit from their name, image, and likeness starting Thursday. So by the time this comes out, all your favorite college athletes will be able to make money from their name. So shout out to the WNBA and the NCAA for actually doing things right, because the NCAA has been behind the eight ball. I mean, a lot of states have already said that they're willing to pay their college athletes, and the NCAA was like, you know what? We look bad regardless, so let's just do it. Whatever. We're a multi-billion-dollar organization. Let's just do it. And the WNBA, shout out to them. Always showing us how it should be done. But speaking of things that should be done, don't forget to subscribe to the Shooting Bricks podcast and leave a review on your platform of choice. It really helps us out. Lastly, make sure to follow us on @PodcastBricks on Twitter, @ShootingBricksPodcast on Instagram, and @The Shooting Bricks Podcast on YouTube for all the news and the video of this episode of the Shooting Bricks Podcast. And as always, I'm Jerry Castillo.
I'm Daniel Nguyen. To everyone out there, have a safe 4th of July, and God bless America, and joining me as well.
Yes, and I hope you guys are enjoying this episode on the weekend. You guys are traveling, go ahead and pop it up on your radio. And if you guys are sharing our content, please be sure to tag us so we can share it as well. But of course, it's your boy, Really Real, Gerrel.
And we will see you guys next week.